Well, this is the second season for our water garden, and like our perennial gardens, it's really looking better over time. It's maturing, and thanks to our water plants, it's really looking very nice. Now, that's one of the keys to having a water garden, is that you actually keep up with the plants. You may need to divide them. They take a little bit of attention through the growing season. And the fun thing about it is, with them growing and dividing, you can share them with your friends and neighbors. Now, I want to show you some ways to propagate some of the water plants, and some of the methods are very simple. Take, for example, our Kinky Rush here, kind of a corkscrew plant, and it was in a pretty large clump, and we wanted to be able to share that, divide it up, and all we did was just take it out of the container, take a knife, and cut it in half, and then repot it as two separate plants. Very simple. Also, a pretty simple method is just, with some of the plants, they have a tendency to send out side shoots or runners, like the taro here. You can see it's very root bound. It needs bumping up into a larger pot, but it sends out these side shoots with adventitious roots. And so what we'll do is just cut one of those off and then just repot it pretty much about the same depth there with the roots. It'll take off, and we've already gotten, oh gosh, probably 4 plants just from our one start. So this one's very aggressive, and again, that's pretty simple to do. Now, another one that's along the same principle is a floating plant, which is a water hyacinth. And once you get them started, remember these are tropical, so we kept it in the greenhouse, but they also send out side shoots there. And that's one way, again, just to divide them. Now you could give this one to the neighbor or stick it in a separate part of the pond. And since they float on the top, there's no potting that's needed with this one. But again, it'll send out side shoots, very easy to separate. Now, another one that's kind of interesting is the umbrella palm. It's very aggressive and cascading. The pot, actually, they like to be a little bit root bound, and we'll probably stick this mature one back in there before we repot it, maybe the end of the season or next summer. But it's an interesting way to get this one propagated. What you do is you actually cut off one of the stalks, just like this, and what you do, you use regular potting soil, and we're going to do it in a smaller pot because we're actually propagating it. You put it upside down into the soil, and you just barely cover that where to hold it down in there with the soil, just like this. And in no time at all, you'll start getting that to root. And if you look at this one over here on the parent plant, you'll see that it's trying to send out other plantlets anyway, right here in the cluster. And that's the same principle that we have here. This is one we did about 4 or 5 weeks ago. If you look closely, you can actually see the stem, like here where I cut it off, and now it's rooted and sending them back up. And this one will be ready to bump up into the pot that we'll keep it in the water garden. So that's kind of an interesting one, lots of fun. And you can imagine how many you could start off of one plant. Again, they're very, very aggressive. Now, once it's rooted in that size, like I say, it's time to repot it. And there's a key to potting up some of these water plants. You want to do a little bit differently than you normally would house plants or container plants. Now, the container is important. You can buy specialized water garden containers like this one, but they don't have holes in the bottom. And we kind of learned the hard way on this one. We brought it out of the greenhouse, set it on one of our margins over here, but it wasn't submerged enough for the water to go over the top. And the reason it's scorched like this is it actually set in the pond, but there was no water in the root zone for almost a week, and that's why it's scorched. So you want to be careful. If you use one without holes, you need to make sure that it's submerged where the water will go over the top of the pot. We use just traditional nursery pots that have holes in the bottoms, and so that way, if we don't submerge it all the way and the pot sticking up, water will be taking it from the bottom too. But that's one way that we recycle them. Now, the other thing that you need to remember is once you start potting them, especially if you have holes in the bottom or ones without holes, put a little bit of gravel in the base of it first of all, probably about an inch layer just up past the holes. That way it will allow moisture up through the bottom. It will also hold the soil in a little bit better too. Now, what I'm going to demonstrate with is actually a couple of plants you may not think about using in the water garden that often. The first one here is called a Hyacinth, and it's one of our perennial ground covers right here behind me. very, very aggressive. I've heard horror stories about how aggressive it is, but it does great as a water garden plant. So we've dug up a clump, and first of all, we're going to put our soil mix in. Now what I'm using is just heavy clay soil, which we have an abundance of here in Stillwater. We just go out, dig it up. We don't want to use a well-drained or soilless mix like we did our propagation in, because that's real light and it floats out of the containers. And the heavier the soil, the more it will hold the moisture and hold it where it will sink better in the ground. So what we'll do is we'll just place that in the container, and a little bit deeper, we'll cover it with the soil along the sides. And again, we've got the heavy clay soil, and we're going to push that along the sides here. And once we get finished with that, the next thing that you want to do is put a layer of the gravel along the surface. And this again will hold the soil in a little bit better. And you'll notice that on almost all of our water garden plants that have been in for a while. So the Hutania will also do great in the water garden. Another one you may not think about is a Canna Lilly. And we've got some of those planted up, and this one will actually add color to the water garden too. One that does well out in the landscape, but it also will grow it submerged in full water, so a little bit different on that. Now once they're planted, this is also the time you can put fertilizer tablets in. You just poke them in according to direction, give you some nutrition throughout the growing season. So you can see water gardens and propagating is a lot of fun, easy to share with the neighbors, so keep an eye on it, because don't forget your plants need a little bit of attention throughout the growing season as well.